IVM.
As adults, sometimes we ourselves struggle with keeping up our confidence and self esteem intact after suffering a major setback ourselves. But there is something harder for us as parents. Watching your child go through those soul shattering feelings and feeling your own heart crumble to bits within your body. All likely seen these things happen with our children. Seen our child locked up in a room because everyone hates her, or caught your child saying, I so suck at this, I cannot do this. Or he tricked me, I didn't know that this could have happened to me. Or seen them being insulted for just being themselves and then watch them go over stages of grief, confusion, denial, anger, and then the thing that no parent wants to see, acceptance. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how we can help our children develop the superpower of assertiveness. Almost every job in the world requires training, except parenting.
You need to learn parenting on the job, and that can be really hard.
Here on Big Talk About Tiny Humans, we want to help you navigate the world of parenting better and make your lives a little bit easier.
Hi, I'm Meghna.
And hi, I'm Devishobha.
Every week, we bring you the best research on parenting,
Top tips from experts,
and actionable strategies to confront the numerous challenges that all parents and educators face.
So let's get started, shall we? So, as a child, and I think as many people would have experienced as children, I myself went through a lot of issues with assertiveness. I had a lot of instances where I was tricked into believing something only to find out later that the other side of the deal was not kept. I would feel miserable about myself. I would blame myself. I would feel like a fool. And later on, initially, I used to share it with my parents, but later on, I even stopped sharing because it just felt like, this pattern was repeating over and over again. I did not know how to, build these boundaries around myself. I did not know how to assertively say no or assertively say yes. Right. So, Meghna, a lot of people like myself still have very blurry ideas about what assertiveness is and what it isn't. And in a culture like India, where seniority due to age demands assent mostly, whether you agree or not, how do we gain clarity as parents on classifying assertive behavior and demarcating it from rudeness? Because I think this is something that a lot of adults struggle with, especially parents, because they have a greater responsibility of passing on this knowledge in a correct manner to their children. So, how do we do this?
Thanks, Shobha. First of all, my heart goes out to you. I had no idea you went through that as a child. And thanks for being so vulnerable and so strong in sharing such a painful part of your childhood with us and with our listeners. Yes, you're absolutely right. In India, especially in our culture, standing up for one's rights or drawing boundaries is considered rude. It's considered selfish. Advocating for oneself, we're never taught how to advocate for ourselves. We are always taught to be obedient. We are always taught to be, oh, sweet, listen to everybody, listen to elders, respect elders. I don't know how we got this idea that listening to somebody means respecting them. So this actually completely goes against the concept of assertiveness, which basically means being able to recognize and stand up for one's rights and being able to express oneself with honesty and firmness and calmness. Okay. Being assertive does not mean that you will trample upon or be upon the rights of the others or be mean to others or be hurtful to others. Being assertive means being able to stand up for oneself, but in a way that's respectful of the rights of the others. Right? So I can say no. I can draw my boundaries clearly. I can communicate those boundaries respectfully, right? I can maintain positive relationships that meet my own needs. I don't have to, just to maintain the tag of sweet or obedient or respectful. I don't really have to, give up my own needs. I don't have to only honor other people's needs. Assertiveness being also means being able to honor my own needs. And I'll give you an example for this. Imagine that there's a child standing in a queue at a water fountain and another child cuts in the queue and stands right in front of him. Or, and this used to happen to me a lot, a classmate copies all the homework from you and you
Hmm.
don't like it, right? Because you're willing to lend out your notebooks, but you don't necessarily like them copying your answers word for word, right? So the way to respond to these situations would assertively would not be, does not mean that you should get aggressive, punch the child, or shout at them, or neither does responding assertively mean that you're being passive. It does not mean that you're quietly giving your notebook despite feeling uncomfortable. But an assertive response would be to say, hey, I was standing here before you.
Hmm.
An assertive response here would be to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with my homework being copied. Right. So,
Hmm.
yes, there are a lot of misconceptions about being assertive, but being assertive does not mean that you always get your way. And advocating for yourself or drawing boundaries does not mean that you're rude or selfish.
Right. Thanks for that great example. In a situation where a child is left to themselves, right? About left to themselves when handling a situation, which mostly happens in Indian scenarios where children are left out to play for themselves. Not right now, but usually, right? Not in the pandemic scenario, but usually it happens, when they are in a classroom scenario. Adults are not very privy to the fact of, the situations that are going on around them, and typically bullying also happens because assertiveness is not taught
Yeah.
as a skill, right?
Yeah.
And which is why bullies have the need to keep it a secret, and also the people being bullied also keep it a secret, surprisingly, because they simply do not know how to communicate,
Yeah.
right?
On this note, let's take a break and come back.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by Alex Dweck of NAS Academy. They discuss creators becoming educators. On Misconduct, Raghavi and Nisha look into the defamation suit against controversial actress Kangana Ranaut. On Audio Gyan, Kedar speaks to industrial designer Sharat Chauhan. They discuss designing home appliances. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth explains the difference between two kinds of campaigns, awareness building and brand building. And on Hans Vani, hear how two cancer patients fall in love in the story Grey Shades. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. And also remember, you can check out a lot of our stuff on YouTube. Go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube and you'll get a list of all the various channels that we do have. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back.
So tell us, the steps involved imparting this skill. And first of all, why is assertiveness such an important skill? Why should parents and teachers emphasize on this important skill? And why should we talk about it? And how often should we talk about this to children?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on its head when you talked about bullying, because assertiveness is actually a very necessary part of establishing trust and safety in relationships. If a child grows up afraid to speak up for himself, he might either end up getting bullied, or he might end up passively allowing resentment to build in his or her future relationships. And in fact, this has been corroborated by research. It's not just some Western concept that we are copying it. Research has consistently demonstrated that children who actually display assertiveness have healthier relationships, have higher self-esteem. Children who act assertively are less likely to experience anxiety, are less likely to experience depression, and are less likely to be influenced by peer pressure, and are less likely to be bullied. So, yes, it is an extremely important skill, and like any other life skill, can be taught and practiced.
Right. So can you go over the how-tos? How can parents and teachers incorporate this, like weave it into our everyday communication and interactions with our children? How can we make it seem seamless,
Sure. So there are, I will be mainly discussing four strategies, Shobha. And with each strategy, I'll try to give a few examples, say with either a young child or even with a teen, because it's never too late to start teaching the skill to your child. And then, maybe whatever questions you have, you can ask me, you can interrupt me in between and ask me. So one of the first strategies for helping your child learn assertiveness is helping your child set boundaries. Right. So what do boundaries mean? Boundaries can be physical, boundaries can be emotional. So teaching your child about physical and emotional boundaries basically involves explaining to them how important these boundaries are to one's safety and to one's privacy. So, for both younger and older children, explaining to them the concept of body autonomy, they should speak up if their body autonomy is being violated. If if they've not given consent for something and that's being violated, even within the parent-child relationship, it's important that you teach your child that she is within her right to expect respect of her personal boundaries from you. Teaching your child to say no even if she doesn't want you or anyone else to hug her, to kiss her, not making her feel guilty by saying, oh, it makes mama sad when you don't give her a hug. No, this means that you are putting the burden of your feelings on your child and obviously violating her boundaries. When it comes to teens, for example, and this is again very common in especially our households, that when a teen speaks up and challenges your maybe rules or challenges something that you may have said, your opinion or your values, we again see that as a mark of disrespect. Whereas it should be actually seen as a teen trying to practice debating your rules, practicing questioning authority, because this helps him learn how to speak up, in situations where he needs to stand up for himself. So it's actually a good idea to encourage your teen to debate your rules because it helps him practice speaking his own mind.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, so
Questioning your authority would help your teen learn to stand up for themselves in a safe place, that is at home.
Right.
It teaches them the skills to stand up for themselves outside the house.
Absolutely.
Right? It teaches them to say no to things that they don't like.
Yeah.
So the first step is definitely setting boundaries. The second step is emotion coaching, teaching your child how to express your feelings, even if they are negative, even if they are big, even if they're painful, especially if they're negative, especially if they're big and painful. When we teach our children assertiveness, we need to give them the tools to be able to communicate these big feelings. We need to teach them how to communicate your anger, how to communicate your hurt, how to communicate your disappointment or frustration respectfully. So, for example, instead of yelling at his sibling in anger, when his privacy has been violated, teach your child that a good way to be assertive is to say, you know what, I'm angry that you went into my room without my permission. Please stop doing that. That is an assertive response, even when your child is angry at their sibling. And if your child's anger or hurt is directed towards you, respond by acknowledging the feeling. I understand that you're angry. See, there's a difference between feelings and behavior. All feelings are okay, but all behaviors are not okay. You can place limits and, you can place limits around behaviors, but don't place limits around feelings. Right. So instead of getting defensive or preachy, in turn, it's a good idea to respond even when you are being challenged by your child with acknowledging their feeling. And then, of course, going ahead and, setting boundaries. So I talked about boundaries. And of course, I talked about emotion coaching. The third and a very important part of teaching your child assertiveness is assertive communication. Communication, right? How do I speak up? How do I advocate for my rights? How do I draw these boundaries? So one very useful strategy across ages is really helping your child, asking your child to think of people or situations where, he might need to speak up, and then role playing those situations at home by choosing roles and then switching the roles after each scenario and then giving feedback to each other. And if you notice the examples that I gave in the beginning of this episode, I talked about, the cue cutting and, the giving of the homework and the homework being copied. I used, when I was giving an example of an assertive response, I used what are known as I statements. I statements is, instead of saying you did this or you did that, which sort of is like blaming and puts the other person on the defensive. When you want to speak assertively, teach your child to use I statements. I would be more comfortable talking if you lower your voice. I will not be comfortable if you copy my homework blindly. I do not, I. So when you say I, it's kind of difficult to dispute, right? So that is a very effective sort of communication skill that you can teach in order to teach assertiveness to your child. And this is really my favorite. While watching TV and movies, and I do this with my kids, when we're reading books, we talk about which characters are assertive, which characters are passive, which characters are actually acting assertively. And this helps your child recognize these different styles of communication, right? And understand that if this person is acting aggressively or talking aggressively, what is the outcome for them? If they are being assertive, what is the outcome? If they are being passive and, submissive, what is the outcome? So that
Hmm.
it usually helps.
Oh, great. So this is storytelling techniques in at play, and also allowing them to play with their imagination, express themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think role plays and using movies and books to have
Hmm.
these discussions is a very good idea, because there's so many situations, complex peer
Yeah.
situations and social situations that you come across that you may not have come across because of the pandemic in the last 1.5 years.
Right.
Right. And the final strategy that I want to talk about is, of course, my favorite one, which is applicable across the board for anything that you want to teach your child, which is basically modeling.
Right.
Right? Monkey see, monkey do. As a parent, you can model assertiveness when you are yourself interacting with family members or friends, or when you're making work calls, or when you're
Hmm.
talking to salespeople, or in any everyday situation. You
Hmm.
know, like for example, if you tell someone no, it's
Hmm.
a good idea to stick to your word and make sure that your child is watching you.
Hmm.
And you're teaching your child that holding your ground is very important, especially with people who may have violated your boundaries or who've
Right.
attempted to violate your boundaries.
Right.
Also, and I would like to leave this on this note, the final way in which you can model perhaps is having family conversations about it.
Yeah.
How could mom have spoken assertively with her boss when he didn't give her the raise she thought that she deserved? How could dad have been more assertive when the mechanic overcharged him to fix the car? Right?
Right.
Imagine
Right.
having these discussions with your child and
Yeah.
encouraging them to come up with their own ideas and
Right.
talking about which one would work best and what outcomes would be and all that stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, in
Absolutely.
basically involving your kids in these everyday situations and using those everyday moments as teachable
Yeah.
moments to impart the skill of assertiveness.
Yeah. And I think one of our episodes, the family meal episodes, also talks about using the family meal time to actually model
Absolutely.
these conversations, right? So it's a great way
Absolutely.
to weave this in our everyday routine, right? So
Totally.
it's practiced every day, modeled every day. And I think I completely agree with your the need to teach assertive communication skills. And it brought to mind a research thesis, or even a TED
Study.
talk by research study by Dr. Amy Cuddy. She's a well-known TED speaker, and she speaks about how to imagine these stressful situations. That you're going to be facing a stressful situation, probably a big presentation that you have to make, or for your child it might be just facing up to a stressful situation in classroom, facing up to a big group of children that are not very friendly with her or with him, or facing up to a bully, or talking in front of a class. All these are stressful situations, right? So Dr. Amy Cuddy suggests practicing the 2-minute power pose, where she advocates just standing in front of a mirror, just practicing for 2 minutes just before you enter a stressful situation, and just use a power pose, like putting your hands on your hips and standing with your feet wide apart, and actually striking a power pose, so
Right.
that you feel that you have more
Yeah.
power, and you're simulating that powerful image of yourself. So when you imagine yourself as being more powerful, more assertive, it is just so much more effective when you go out into the real situation and actually face it. So
I
it
must
comes out much.
confess,
Yeah.
oh my God, I must confess that I actually use that strategy before my parenting workshops and I have to address parents.
Yeah, me too. Actually, I do that whenever I have a presentation to make. Whenever I have to,
It
I have
helps,
a
no?
stressful.
It
Yes,
really helps.
absolutely helps. Absolutely. In fact, I even practice it in some family conflict situations.
Oh, thank you. I think I'll try that at home.
Yeah. So
Power pose. Mom, what are you doing? Oh, this is my power pose. I'm assertive, baby.
yeah, absolutely. So going back to what you said, we have 4 points. It is B for boundaries, right? Help them set boundaries, make them practice setting boundaries. And this is especially important, more important than we think, because there are so many situations that can be actually dangerous for the child. For example, sexual predators. There is a study that says that people who get sexually abused are actually attacked by people who the family knows,
Yeah, yeah,
in more
yeah,
than
yeah.
90% of the
Yeah.
cases, right? So it's very, very important to understand what boundaries are and set them immediately at the outset. And
Absolutely.
this is a skill that needs to be practiced from the get go, from very early on. Even a child as young as 3 or 4 should be taught to say no or yes and communicate, in a very strong manner, very clear manner to their caretakers, right? So setting boundaries, B, and then emotion coaching, talking about emotions. Of course, you explained it very beautifully. And then teaching assertive communication skills, and then modeling behavior. So it is BEAM.
Beam.
Yeah, BEAM. B for boundaries, E for emotions, A for assertive communication skills, and then M for modeling behavior. So this is a mnemonic for helping practice these skills over and over again. In fact, great to be doing it on a daily basis. So this was our episode on teaching assertive communication skills to children. Thank you very much for being here with us.
So that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening to Big Talk About Tiny Humans, our podcast for parents and educators.
Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family.
Listen and subscribe to Big Talk About Tiny Humans on the IVM Podcasts app, website, and all major audio platforms. We are available everywhere.
You can follow us on social media and online. Meghna is at The Therapist Mommy on Instagram and YouTube. And you can check out her website, raisingfamilyacademy.com, for a transformative course on raising a child with emotional intelligence.
And Devishobha is at Kidskintha on Twitter and Instagram. And check out kidskintha.com for in-depth articles and events on parenting and child development.
While you're at it, do also check out other great shows from the IVM Podcasts network at shows.ivmpodcasts.com. And IVM is on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
We'll catch you again on our next episode.
इन्फ्लेशन, फिस्कल डेफिसिट, जीडीपी, एमएसपी, एनपीए, इक्विटी मार्केट वगैरह वगैरह। दोस्तों, हमने सारे शब्द टीवी या अखबार में जरूर देखे होंगे या फिर सुने होंगे, पर हम में से कितने लोग हैं जो ये जानते हैं कि इन सब का सीधा प्रभाव पड़ता है हमारी सैलरी पर, हमारे इंक्रीमेंट पर और कमबख्त हमारे खर्चों पर। दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है अभिनव त्रिवेदी और मैं बात कर रहा हूँ इक्का दुक्का इकोनॉमी पॉडकास्ट से, जहाँ पे इस तरह के इकोनॉमिक और फाइनेंशियल टर्म्स को मैं जोड़ूंगा सीधा आपकी जेब से। हर मंगलवार एक नया एपिसोड सुने IVM पॉडकास्ट की वेबसाइट, ऐप या फिर किसी भी अन्य पॉडकास्ट प्लेटफॉर्म पर।
What is the workplace and how does your gender and body affect your right at work? Hey, I'm Priya Mirza, and on the Longest Constitution podcast, we critically examine the vision of the Indian Constitution and laws. In season 1, we looked at sex, gender, sexuality in India, and the landmark judgments which transformed our rights as citizens in this country. In season 2, we discussed the laws which shape the workplace and examine how ability, competence, and merit impact us, and much more. Join me, Priya Mirza, every Wednesday only on the IVM Podcast app, website, and all the major podcast streaming platforms.